Hey everyone, Kelly here, and today I'd like to talk about the books that I read in February. And I had a really good reading month. I read like 6, 7, 8, 9 books, which is pretty good. But I did have a few 3 stars that were kind of teetering between 2 and 3 stars. So that wasn't great. But other than that, I had several 4 stars, and I had a 5-star, and I had a 5-star thriller, which is, I don't know the last time I had a 5-star thriller. So overall, pretty good month. Let's get my 3 stars out of the way first. Because like I said, all of these were teetering on the 2 side of the 3 stars, probably more like a 2.5. But I don't give half stars. So I just gave them 3. But yeah, all were a bit of a disappointment. So I had I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. And this is translated by Ross Schwartz. This is a book that was written, I think, in the 90s, originally in French. Is that right? Yeah, originally written in the 90s in French, and it has had kind of resurgence lately. I don't know when it was translated, but I've seen it on a lot of YouTube channels in the last 4 years probably. And it's a dystopian that has kind of a feminist view. We are following this group of women. Mainly we are in the head of one of them, the youngest, who starts off as a child, and these 40 women are trapped in a bunker, and there are men who are the guards, but they don't ever talk to them, so they have no idea why they're in this bunker. The older women don't remember how they got to be in the bunker. They remember life before, but they don't remember how they got there. Our main character was too young to remember time before this bunker. And does it tell in here? I don't want to give anything away because it's not too long of a book. It just says in the description that soon our main character will find herself to be the key to the others' escape and survival in the strange world that waits for them above ground. So that's what I'm going to say. Okay, so this one, I think it has some really good points. And the themes, I think it had some good themes. But I think that even though I understood the themes and I appreciate the themes, this wasn't the package that I necessarily appreciated getting the themes from. I just found it pretty boring. I didn't really like to be in this main character's head the whole time. So even though I appreciate what the author was getting at and the point of the book, I just didn't enjoy the process of actually reading the book, if that makes sense. But a lot of people love this, so don't take my word for it. Read the 5-star reviews. A lot of people like it. It could have just been me and listening, because it is a first-person narration, and maybe I just didn't like being in the head of this main character, and so check out other reviews. And the next one's pretty disappointing for me, because I think this means I'm giving up on this series now. This is Tuhanu by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is the 4th book in the Earthsea series. And I've just had an up and down with this series. The first book, A Wizard of Earthsea, I liked it. I think I gave it 4 stars, but it wasn't necessarily new favorite or anything, but I liked it enough to keep going. Second book, I really loved. We were following, and the way these work is that even though we have a main character that is kind of in all the books, he's not always the main character. He's the main character in the first book, and he's the main character in the 3rd book, but he is a main character, but he's not the person we're following in the 2nd and 4th book. And so I really loved the main character in the 2nd book, which was a young girl. And this is the same young girl, but as a widowed adult. So years have passed, 25 years have passed since book 2. And, oh, and then by the way, I hated book 3. So book 2, I really enjoyed following the girl. Book 3, hated that one. But then I was oh, book 4, we were following the same character from book 2, but as an older person, and so I might really appreciate following her again. Still really liked her as a character, still really liked her interaction with our other main character that's in all the books, the wizard, but nothing happens in this book, and so it was a little, it's not terribly long, it's only there's an afterword in this, so there's only 265 pages long, and it felt like it took me forever to read it because it just nothing would happen and I would just get bored. And even though I liked the characters, it's kind of just following them in their day-to-day life. And then the last 3 chapters, a bunch of stuff happens, and that was really interesting and I really liked the ending. But until then, it was the first 200 pages was just nothing. Really, it felt so yeah. I'm giving it a 3 because, like I said, I really appreciate the characters and I did appreciate the ending, but it wasn't enough for me to want to keep going in this series. This was written a lot farther along, so she had written the first 3 books and then came back to this, like, I don't know if it was 10, 15 years later, but there's a big gap. So I don't feel like I necessarily need to keep going. Like, I feel like I could have just read the first 3 and it would have been fine. I wanted to give this a chance because it's a character I liked, but I was pretty disappointed, so I don't think I'm going to keep trying to push my way since I really didn't like book 3 and this one was boring. So I'm done with that series, which is unfortunate. And I think the next one is actually a short story collection. So I don't know, is that like something I would want to do because they're like short snippets? But I just don't think so. I don't think I want to invest any more time in that series. And the last one that's a disappointment was Immaculate Conception by Ling Ling Wang. And this is one where it is really hard to rate this one because there were times when I was really loving and I was really like invested in the themes and what was going on. And then there were times where I'm like, get me out of this main character's head. I cannot stand to be in her head. But I thought a lot about this book a lot afterwards, but it made me feel really icky reading it. Like, I don't know. So maybe that means it's a great book because it gave me lots of feelings, and that's probably why a lot of other people like it. But I was like uncomfortable most of the time reading this, and not like, you know, like sometimes you read a nonfiction book that's got challenging things, and so like you feel uncomfortable, but you feel like you appreciate the experience of reading it, even though you're uncomfortable. And this one, I was just like, yes, I did appreciate some of the themes, but I, once again, did not love the package it came in. I don't know. This one, it's hard to talk about because it's got so much going on, which is another thing. It just has so much happening. I think if it had targeted in on a few things and made it shorter, I might have liked it better. But we are following our main character, Inca, who starts off going to art school and meets Mathilde, and they become good friends. But it's like the kind of friendship where it's definitely a power imbalance. Inca is like basically obsessed with Mathilde. Mathilde is the one that's kind of like the genius in their art school. Inca always feels kind of like second best and like, or last best. Like she feels like she isn't really a artist of her own, that she's always mimicking other art. And so she's having trouble like feeling confident, but then Mathilde, she kind of latches onto Mathilde. And then, so we start off at art school and then we move into their adulthood and how their friendship has changed over the years, and how Inca still has this kind of obsessive, feels very toxic relationship to Mathilde. And yeah, and like just how that is working. And then something happens to Mathilde that Inca kind of has to take care of her. And so then we have this kind of caretaking relationship and the manipulation that can come from that when you feel really jealous of the person that you're taking care of. Yeah, so I don't want to go any farther than that because I don't, like, it has so much in it. And I feel like if you read the synopsis, the stuff they talk about in the synopsis does not happen until like 3/4 of the way into the book, at least. I mean, maybe 60%, but like probably more like 70% of the way into the book. And so I don't want to talk about that, but there's a lot of technology. Like, it's kind of a futuristic, there's art. So the stuff I did like was we're learning about this, like, in the future where, you know, AI really affects like the art world, which makes sense because it's happening now. About, I mean, even like book covers, we talk about AI created book covers, and then, but this is really diving into like fine art and like how do you have physical real art from people when AI creates like anything at a moment, at like a touch of a button? And do people really appreciate real art created by humans when they can just experience any art they want on the internet? And so it's kind of like the future of art and technology, and how artists have to be even more like beyond just like painting on a canvas, have to like do all these experimental things to be different and try to be different than AI. So that was, I really liked that theme of kind of the discussion of art and technology. And then there was just discussions about where technology could be going in terms of consciousness and cloning and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of things in this. And it's also a lot of psychological stuff about, you know, manipulation and jealousy and all that. So I don't know, when I hear myself talking about it, like there's so much to talk about and there's so much to think about with this book that like part of me is like, should it be a 4-star? But then the other part of me is like, I had a really hard time making myself continue reading it because I just really hated to be in the main character's head, but that's on purpose. It's like, it's basically like, this is the same experience I had with, what's it called? The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Snake? Is that what? I don't know. The one that we're following President Snow in the Hunger Games series. I hated that book because I was in Snow's mind, and being in the mind of a narcissist is really uncomfortable because it's like you're feeling like they're justifying these horrible things, but you're in their head, so you see the justification and you're like, but wait, no, that's not right. Well, that's like this. She's probably for sure a narcissist, and so like being in her head was really uncomfortable, and like feeling like these things are justified when you're like, no, that's not how we treat people. And that's not okay. And to be in the head of somebody that's like doing that was really uncomfortable. So I don't know. If you are okay with a main character that's very unlikable and are okay being in the mind of a narcissist because you appreciate the themes, then I think you will like that. A lot of people love this. I just had trouble like bridging the good themes with the package I had to listen to it or be in the mind of. All right, that seemed like a lot of discussion on the ones I didn't love. So let's move on to 4 stars. So the rest of these are 4 stars and then my 1 5-star. So next I have Tiger by S.F. Said. This is a middle grade fantasy, and this is a alternate historical London. So in this historical London, the like English Empire kind of never ended. So like there's a lot of people. So basically in this one, it sounded like the English still have like America and like all of India and all of the Middle East are all part of the empire. And then there's also kind of a magical beings. So we're following this boy who is from kind of where would be the Middle East now, living in London, and anybody from that area is kind of a second-rate citizen in this version of London. And so he's kind of like kept like kind of in kind of, you know, like the ghettos or whatever. Like he has an area that he's allowed to live in, and every time he goes with the like where the Londoners are, then he's definitely like, is he a thief? Is he doing something else? And he's like, I'm just trying to make a living here. I'm just like, his family, I don't remember what they sell. I think it's like tapestries or something like that. I don't remember what it is, but they, you know, his parents are merchants and he's trying to sell, but he's not trusted in a lot of places because of where he's from. Even though he's like, I grew up here, I'm from London. And you know, like obviously it's a metaphor for what a lot of immigrants go through in current days. But anyways, we're following this boy, now I can't remember his name, Adam. And one day he meets this tiger, and in this world, tigers are extinct. And so he's like, who is this? And it turns out to be kind of like a magical being, kind of like from another realm or whatever, like a celestial being in the form of a tiger. And the tiger wants him to do these things in order... The problem is I've read this and I still don't really understand what the tiger was trying to get him to do. So I was it has a lot of little elements that are kind of magical realism, and so I was confused in some places of what was happening. But it's like there's the London that he's in, and then there's like this other celestial realm, and I think he's trying to help the tiger get back to the celestial realm, and that by doing that he would also defeat like a bad guy that came from the celestial realm that's trying to kind of control the humans. I don't know. I gave this 4 stars because I did enjoy the story, but I don't feel like I fully understand what was happening, which is kind of unusual since it is middle grade. But it was like beautiful in places with his friendship with there's a girl that he's friends with in here, and then kind of him coming to see his own power and stuff like that. So the themes were great. There's also illustrations throughout it. So yeah, there was a lot of good things about it. So I did give it 4 stars, but hard to explain what it's actually about. All right, and then I read a contemporary romance. This is The Heartbreak Hotel by Ellen O'Clover. And this is about a girl who has been in a really long relationship, and then her and her boyfriend break up. And they shared this house that they were renting together that is like her dream house. She absolutely loves it. And she tells her boyfriend that, because he had cheated and everything. So she's like, the only thing I want from you is I want the house. But he was the one that made most of the money. So she can't really afford to rent the house, but she really wants it. So she makes a deal with the landlord that she's like, if you let me stay here, I will turn this giant house into basically an Airbnb, and then you can get all the profits, but I get to live here for free. And she still gets to live in this dream house. So that's the concept. And then she kind of turns it into this Heartbreak Hotel, where she kind of starts advertising it as a place where people who have just recently left a relationship can heal and all that stuff. So there's a lot in here about grief and overcoming, getting your confidence back after a relationship, or just like finding who you are again after a breakup. So there's a lot of that because we meet a lot of the guests and her interaction with them. And then there's like a romance. I don't know if it's pretty obvious from the description that the romance is going to be with the landlord. So they're definitely, it's not like a hate to love, but he's definitely like pretty standoffish at first and kind of seems like he doesn't like her, and is kind of like, she's a little more flighty and all that. But there's also a lot of grief and sadness in this book at the same time as romance. So just be aware of that it isn't just like cute, fluffy romance. Like there's definitely some really hard topics that they're discussing, and sadness at the same time. But it was good. And then I have Good People by Padmina Savit. And this is a book of the month book I just got last month, and this was so interesting. So this is a story about an immigrant family. So they're from Afghanistan, and they came as refugees to the United States, and they basically came with nothing. And the father really built up like his fortune, started from the with, like I said, with nothing, and I think he was like a dishwasher or something at a bakery, and then he gets to where he's buying multi-million-dollar home in this really affluent area of Virginia outside of Washington, D.C. And so we hear about that, but then the focus of the story is kind of current day when they are, a wealthy family, and something tragic happens in their family. And then this whole thing is told in like interviews and newspaper clips. And so there's really short chapters. So like it's all just super short. I mean, there's some that are a few pages long, but yeah, it's like all of these super short things. Sometimes it's actual like teeny tiny little things or newspaper articles, all relate. So it's kind of like we're hearing from people that were friends of the family, friends of the kids in the family, neighbors that may or may not have had a relationship with them, but live near them and see them. You're hearing from the kind of not from directly from the police, but like the things that the police have told the newspapers. You're hearing from lawyers and activists and all this stuff, everything that happens in the aftermath of this tragedy. And so we build up to learning about this family and how they got to where they are now, and then what happened to the family and what's happening after this tragedy, and how basically, and we never hear from the family. And so the whole point of it is like how, preconceived notions, gossip, racism, Islamophobia, like all these things can influence what the truth is. That we never like hear the like truth straight from the family of what happened. We're hearing everything that is like the hearsay, everything that is assumed of this family based on their religion, based on the way they live their life, from the viewed from the outside. And so that was really interesting. I was reading this with a friend of mine who also got this from Book of the Month last month. So she and I were like texting each other, and we both were like, what do you think happened? Because like we don't necessarily get the specific you know, this is the truth. So you have to extrapolate from all of this gossip and hearsay and articles and all of this, kind of like you're a jury member, you know, that you're hearing all of these testimonials and like, what do you think actually happened? And I thought that was really fascinating way to write a book. And so I would recommend this. It didn't quite get to 5 stars, but I would definitely read another book by this author. And I really liked, you know, you don't come across like formats that are so different and interesting very often. And I thought this was really interesting. And I just liked also the themes of like, how, I mean, like there were times when we would be hearing from a neighbor and the neighbor's like, oh, you know, I want to like, you know, talk to them and see if they're okay, but I don't want to like invade on them if it's against their culture to do a certain thing. I don't want to like step on their culture, but instead of her reaching out to a neighbor to comfort, she's like afraid of doing that and doing something wrong. So then she doesn't comfort. And so it's kind of like an interesting concept of like, not willing to educate yourself of like what would be the appropriate custom, but instead like, oh, well, you know, I feel bad and I'm a good person because I feel bad, but I'm not actually gonna like do anything about it, because then I might embarrass myself, you know? So that's just like a tiny little bit of the theme of like viewing people from the outside, but not willing to like get in and find out what they're going through in that moment. So yeah, just really fascinating. All right, and then I had 3 books that I just listened to on audiobook, so I don't have them physically. I got a couple of these as ARCs from Libro FM, and I actually read them in the month that they came out, which it was great because that's the whole point of getting ARCs, so that I can review them and encourage other people to read them. So this first one was not an ARC. It was a newer book. I think it came out in December, but I didn't read it as a Libro FM ARC. But it is a newer book. It's called Why Do I Keep Doing This by Katie Morton. This one I gave 4 stars. And this is just a nonfiction book that is basically about mental health. And like, why do we keep doing the things? Like, why do we keep getting defensive? Why do we keep, like when people try to talk to us about something that we've done wrong or something, why do we immediately get defensive? Why do we close up and not want to talk about our feelings? Why, you know, like kind of talking about the things that have happened, like probably in our childhoods that have molded us to who we are today. And we try to like combat that and we try to change, but it's really hard to change those like deep set things. And so then we know the right thing to do in a moment or something, but we're like, those instincts that have been ingrained in us from childhood keep like rearing their head and like, why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep pushing people away in relationships? Why do I keep like going towards anger instead of resolution or stuff like that? You know, stuff that is basic human mental health issues. And so it's not like it's mind-blowing or anything. Like this is pretty logical stuff, but I think it's a good thing to remind ourselves sometimes that we're not alone, that we all have struggle with these issues. And, you know, some of us more than others, and some of us need professional help to like move past these. And sometimes we just need to like this isn't a substitute for going to a therapist, but it could also remind you of some of those things that maybe you need to work on and, you know, remind us about things. So I wouldn't say that this is like, you know, groundbreaking or anything like that, but I think it's a good reminder of that, like, these are common human issues and that, you know, there might be a point where you need to seek professional help to deal with them, or just maybe need to be reminded that these are things that we need to work on in ourselves. So yeah, I enjoyed it, 4 stars. Yeah. And then this next one was a new release that I got from Libro FM. It's Anatomy of an Alibi by Ashley Elston. This is a thriller. And okay, in the moment, I gave it 4 stars and I really enjoyed it in the moment. But I read this one at the beginning of the month and I can barely remember it. And so I think it's one of those that I think if you just want a thriller that keeps you entertained in the moment and keeps you interested while you're reading it or listening to it, but that's not going to necessarily stick with you, I think that's fine. And I don't expect every thriller to be like a new amazing thing, a big huge twist that like changes the whole genre. Sometimes you just want entertainment. It's like, you know, sometimes you just want to watch a TV show that you're not necessarily going to think about forever, but that you are entertained in that moment. So this is, to me, like, was an in the moment entertainment book, but I can't really remember much of what happened. I mean, I think I remember the setup. So there's two women that we're following. One of them is in a marriage that she's kind of trying to get out of, but because of her parents have kind of like a control over her life, and her husband has kind of taken part of that control. So she can't just like leave the marriage. She kind of has to have proof that he is doing something wrong in order to leave the marriage and still have any money or whatever. So she's trying to figure out how to do that. And so but her husband kind of like keeps track of her. So she can't just wander off and go track down evidence that he's done something wrong. So she hooks up with this other woman who, like, she basically has this woman become like her alibi and like pretend to be her and go shopping with her credit card and to show all this paper trail of where she is, while she goes and like kind of investigates into her husband's dealings and stuff like that. But while that's happening, her husband is murdered. So then we are left with, you know, she now has like an alibi for the time while he was murdered, but it wasn't her that was doing those things. So it's kind of like two women who are being the same person while a murder has happened. And so it's like, it's very hard to figure out where everybody was and all this stuff. So that's like the setup. And then we're following like kind of before the murder and after the murder, and like how she met this woman, how they got to do this alibi, and then, you know, what actually happened when her husband was murdered. So yeah, it was interesting. It was fun in the moment, but I actually don't even remember. I'm trying to remember now who the murderer was, and I'm like, can I even remember who they were? So that's what I mean about like kind of forgetful afterwards, but interesting in the moment. And then my 5-star, and a 5-star thriller, which hardly ever happens, because usually I like find thrillers entertaining. I can have lots of 4-star thrillers, but a 5-star thriller is pretty rare. But this one just had me gripped the entire time. It's Her Last Breath by Taylor Adams. And this one, I feel like going in knowing less is better. So I'll just say it's like about two best friends who, one is kind of the adventurer. She has like a travel vlog and she kind of goes everywhere. She likes to cave, like do all these things. And she's always for years trying to get her best friend to go caving with her, but her best friend's more of like a homebody and not really like an adventurer. And then finally they go caving together in this like really isolated area. And while they're down in the cave, you know, the cave's kind of like a one way in, one way out. They run into a man. And so that's about all I think you need to know. I think the synopsis has a little more than that. But yeah, basically like it's a very claustrophobic. If you are afraid of caves and are very claustrophobic, I think this would be a hard book, because I feel like it was very visceral. His descriptions were like, had my heart racing. I had moments where I was like listening to this in the car and I'm like, I think I need to pull over because my heart rate is getting so raised, worrying about these people in the cave and what's gonna happen and all this stuff, that you're like, I was like panicked for these characters. And so yeah, it was definitely very very descriptive, very like put you in that situation. And just as a woman, like the thought of being in like a place where you can't easily get away and have a strange man, it's like the whole like conversation right now of, would you want to be in an abandoned area in the woods with a strange man or with a bear? You know, like this is the situation, like people like just finding somebody you don't know and what their intentions are in this dark, you know, close area. So yeah, it was very intense. You know, there's like survival kind of element to it. And yeah, I just thought it was so well done that like hardly any characters, and I felt this way with some of the other. Taylor Adams never has a very big cast. I mean, at most he probably has 5 characters in most of his books, but it's like you can have hardly any character. You could be in one set. I mean, you were just like mostly in this cave the entire time with these like couple characters, and it still can be so intense and so captivating. And yeah, I was just like invested the whole time. There are like, you know, reveals and like some views into the past and like what has led to this and all this. But a lot of it is just this moment in this cave. And yeah, I was blown away by this. Like, completely got to the end of this and I was like, that was 5 stars. That was like the perfect thriller in my opinion. I don't know, but like I said, if you have trouble probably with like very small spaces and that kind of thing, this, like I was trying to describe it to my husband. He's like, I don't want to hear any more about it, because he's like, that just seems like my worst nightmare, being in a cave and needing to get out. And so I'm like, yeah, but it was so good. So I would recommend it if you can handle it. And yeah, it was excellent. I think it's, if you do book of the month, I think it's an add-on this month, so you could like add it on there. Or I thought the narration was good as well in the audiobook, so if you want to get the audiobook version, you can do that as well. And yeah, great book. I feel like I've been talking a long time about the books I read this month, so that's it. Those are the things I read in February. What are you reading currently? Are you reading any really good new releases? Because I feel like a lot of these were newer releases. Like, you know, the 3 that I didn't have physical books were all, you know, 2025 to 2026 releases. And then these 3 are also 2025 or 2026 releases. So a lot of newer books that I'm enjoying. So that was exciting. That's it for me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.